Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on December 22nd, 2025. Today, in a few minutes, we'll speak with friend of Reason to Resist, Laith Marouf. Laith is the executive director of Free Palestine TV, and he'll join us today from where he is based, Beirut, Lebanon. Now, before we begin, if you find this video to be informative, please like and share it. If you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, we warmly encourage you to become one. Today, we passed the threshold of 115,000 subscribers for the first time. We're very grateful to all those who have helped our channel to grow this rapidly since we founded it in the middle of 2024. Now, to begin, we'd like to provide you with a brief update on Israel's ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people, and then I'll bring Laith into the conversation. On Friday of last week, Israeli terrorists bombed a shelter in the Al-Tufa neighborhood in Gaza City. The attack killed 6 and wounded others. The director of Gaza's Al-Shifa Hospital, Mohammed Abu Salmiya, said the victims were a 4-month-old baby, a 14-year-old girl, 2 men, and 2 women. I viewed a gruesome video of the aftermath of this atrocity, but YouTube does not allow us to show you the horrifying reality of what Israel does to Palestinian children. What we can show you is some footage of the aftermath of this atrocity published by TRT.
ايوه خلص اطراح يا عمي بس هاتوا ايوه خد ايوه صح ايوه راحت يا رجل ايوه من عندك.
The Israeli genocide forces said on Friday it was, quote unquote, investigating the strike, and we all know that that will lead nowhere. According to Israel's account, during operations on the Israeli side of the ceasefire line in the Gaza Strip's north, Israeli troops spotted several suspects in quote-unquote dominant structures on the western side of the yellow line, this imaginary line Israel has created as a justification for murdering people. But in this case, what that means is that the people whom it targeted were not on the side of the line where Israel is in control. The genocide forces say its troops fired at the suspects following their identification, but didn't say that they were armed or how they posed a threat. Today, December 22nd, in addition to this terrible news, the Gaza Health Ministry published an update on Palestinian casualties in the Gaza Strip since the so-called ceasefire went into effect. And I'm putting up on the screen here a summary of its report published by Resistance News Network today. And you can see there that the ministry reports that within the past 48 hours, Israel murdered 4 more Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and injured another 7. Since October 11th, Israel has killed 405 Palestinians in the Strip. That's an average of nearly 6 killed per day. During that same period, Israel's genocide forces have injured a total of 1,115 Palestinians. That's an average of more than 15 wounded Palestinians per day. And that, my friends, ain't no ceasefire. Moreover, in the past several weeks, 2 babies have frozen to death in the Gaza Strip due to the harsh winter weather. And here you can see an Al Jazeera article reporting that Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, is urging Israel to let critical aid into Gaza as children freeze to death. A total of 13 Palestinians have died during this period due to the punishing weather conditions and the lack of adequate shelter. MSF has demanded that Israel ease its blockade to enable Palestinians to find adequate shelter and sustenance in these dangerous conditions. MSF also said that its staff has recorded high rates of respiratory infections that it expects to increase throughout the winter, posing a particular danger to the vulnerable civilian population in the Gaza Strip, and particularly to children under 5. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, Israeli settlers and genocide forces continue to terrorize and dispossess Palestinians. Just 4 days ago, Reason to Resist published an interview of a Canadian activist who a couple of weeks ago was beaten by rabid Israeli settlers in the West Bank when she was there to help defend Palestinian residents of a small village in the Jordan Valley from these vicious attacks. And not only was she beaten, but so too were 3 Italian citizens, activists who were there for the same reason. And although both the Italian governments and Canadian government condemned these attacks publicly, our interviewee, who did not want to be identified by name because she didn't want to compromise her ability to stay in the West Bank and help Palestinians, she said that neither the Italian nor Canadian government has actually taken any concrete action whatsoever to assist the victims of this settler assault or to hold them or Israel accountable for this latest crime. Now, yesterday, the genocidal regime also announced that it had legalized 19 settlement outposts in the West Bank. And here you can see a report about this latest illegality from the Israeli liberal newspaper Haaretz. You'll see that according to Haaretz, the move effectively legalizes, that's the word it uses, the repopulation of 4 northern West Bank settlements that Israel evacuated in 2005 under the Oslo Accords. Far-right Minister Smotrich, who spearheaded the initiative, said Israel has authorized 69 new outposts over the past 3 years. So when they start to repopulate in violation of international law, areas that had been evacuated under the Oslo Accords, you can say with complete confidence that Israel is basically showing the international community and those who were supposed to be guarantors of the Oslo Accords the middle finger. There is clearly an unequivocal rejection here on the part of the Israeli political elite of any pretense, let alone reality, pretense of pursuing a two-state solution. Now, one final comment before we bring Laith into the conversation. There is no such thing in international law as the legalization of these settlements. Israel has no authority to legalize the settlements. They are a war crime. They are a violation of the 4th Geneva Convention. And as the International Court of Justice ruled last year in an advisory opinion, the entire occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip is illegal and should have ended by now. So although these outposts may have the status of legality under Israel's domestic laws, that doesn't change the fact that they are a frontal assault on international law. So with that, let's bring our friend Laith Marouf into the conversation. Welcome back, Laith. Good to have you again.
Good to be with you, Dimitri.
So Laith, let's begin by talking about this so-called ceasefire in Gaza. Israeli media report that all living prisoners of war have been returned to Israel by the resistance and that the remains of only one dead POW are yet outstanding. That POW was a soldier in Israel's genocide forces. His name was Givili. And apparently the recovery of his body has been delayed by the harsh weather and, of course, the devastation in Gaza. So by any reasonable measure, the resistance, I think we can say, has done what it can to respect its end of the ceasefire agreement. And what we've been told for months that at this point, they should be gearing up for stage 2 of this process, which envisions the complete withdrawal of Israeli terrorists from the Gaza Strip and the commencement of reconstruction. Do you see any indication at all, Laith, that we are heading into the so-called stage 2 of this process?
No, because obviously part of stage 1 is withdrawal of the occupying forces, and that didn't happen. What the Zionists want to do, and when we say Zionists, I mean the whole empire, is to get everything that it wants and not give the Palestinians anything. Obviously, they haven't been able to achieve disarmament of the Palestinian people or surrender of the Palestinian resistance. That means that we will be back into military activities on both sides very soon if there is no withdrawal of the Israeli occupying forces and they continue to bombard the Gaza extermination camp and the situation doesn't get better. We should be expecting the resistance to be launched again, and we'll be back into a full military confrontation as was before the quote-unquote ceasefire.
Now, as you and I discussed the last time we had you on, there's been a lot of chit-chat at the governmental level about creating an international stabilization force to police the Gaza Strip and disarm the Palestinian resistance. Last time we spoke, those efforts seem to be in disarray. Again, is there any suggestion or indication, as far as you can tell, that they're going to be able to put together some collection of international forces that will take on the task of disarming the resistance?
I mean, for all intents and purposes, there was always an international force fighting the Palestinians. The Zionists didn't fight on their own. All the might of NATO was behind them, whether it's by intelligence gathering or special forces and mercenary forces on the ground inside Gaza, and most probably also Air Force bombardment. You know, we will never know the extent of this, but I remember from just the Syria experience in 1973, in the 1973 war, there was multiple Israeli jets that were downed by the Syrian air defenses in 1973, and the paint wasn't dry on the tail fin. The Israeli flag, you could wipe it with your hand and see the American flag. So even within this war, whether it was the attacks on Lebanon or the attack on Iran, the Israeli Air Force is not capable of conducting this warfare at this scale, at this intensity, with the amount of jets that it has or the amount of pilots that are trained and ready to carry operations on an F-18, F-35, and what have you. So I think, all of this may sound threatening, that there will be an international force to come down to Gaza. But the West did its best over the last 2 years to try to defeat the Palestinian people, and it didn't. So what change could happen? The only thing that will change if they actually do this is that it will be in the open. But would it change the scale on the battlefield? No, it will not. Would it actually bring people behind this effort? No, it will not. It will actually intensify resistance within Western societies to the involvement of their governments in the genocide in Gaza. Up until now, everything's hidden, or at least partially hidden. So if the Western governments decide to actually send troops to Gaza openly, then I expect the level of militancy in the streets of the West will also increase. So I feel this is mainly psychological warfare, mainly also directed towards the Zionist core, those Jewish supremacists that are in occupied Palestine and living in their ghettos, their fancy ghettos in the Western capitals, that are very angry that they haven't been able to totally genocide the Palestinians, that the imperial powers stopped them from totally genociding the Palestinians, and are angry that citizens in Western countries all hate them now. They want everybody to be punished. They want everybody to see that they are have no limits and nobody can stop them. This is the main thing that the Zionists are aiming for currently in their psychological warfare that is also directed to citizens of the West. And therefore, we see the Western elites providing them with whatever will pacify them, even if it's just words for now, to say that they may be working towards an international force. But I don't think it will happen.
And by the way, on the just a footnote on your comments regarding the air assets used to bomb the Gaza Strip, we do know for a fact that the British were flying spy planes repeatedly over the Gaza Strip as Israel was carrying out the genocide. And of course, they don't want to tell us the truth about what they were doing, but there's no question that Israel's Air Force was not alone in the skies over Gaza during the past 2 years. Now, with that, I'd like to turn to the West Bank, Laith. As you probably know, the criminal regime just announced it was going to, quote unquote, legalize 19 settler outposts in the occupied West Bank. And this will involve the repopulation by Israeli settlers of areas that had been evacuated under the Oslo Accords by Israeli settlers. Now, I know you'll agree that to objective and informed observers, it became obvious long ago that the genocidal regime has no intention of allowing the Palestinian people to have their own sovereign and viable state. And still some cling to the belief that a two-state solution is possible. Now, let's just imagine that miraculously, the Israeli regime changed its mind. It said, okay, we're now prepared to have a real discussion about a two-state solution, and was actually prepared to give the Palestinian people a state along the 1967 borders. Just imagine for the sake of argument. My question to you is this, because you are a Palestinian and you live in the region and you've seen with your own eyes what Zionism actually means in practice. How do you feel about that scenario? Would you have any interest as a Palestinian in the two-state solution, assuming that Israel were prepared to give Palestinians a state along the 1967 borders? And if not, what would you think would be the just outcome?
Yeah, look, the quote-unquote two-state solution is an illusion, obviously. The main problem in front of such a solution is that you have somebody that's saying, God gave me this land. I'm part of it, a chosen people. And you know, this historic Israel or Jewish state that existed during the times of the prophets of the Old Testament didn't exist on the coast. It existed in the West Bank and the Galilee. So you're basically would be telling these Jewish supremacists, Jewish extremists, to take a land that they don't think God gave them. By the way, they think the whole planet is theirs, obviously, and we're all Amaleks and Goims. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, no, I personally will never accept a two-state solution. I am a descendant of Palestinians that were expelled from what is now the Zionist colony in its whatever borders. You know, my mother's family come from Haifa. So in such a situation of a two-state solution, I will not be able to get my parents' families home, not be able to visit that, and I cannot return. And international law says the right of return is an individual right. It's not an issue about state. That's I think, the other thing where the conceptualization sometimes limits us when we're talking in this language that the Western audience is trained to listen to and repeat. Because even as a Palestine itself, I want more than Palestine. I want Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, at least to be unified. Those are my people. Those are the Levantians, the coastal Levantians, that my family bloodline crosses all of those borders, even to Iraq. So I don't see Palestine as survivable by itself. And I am against those, you know, this psychos-pico borders between Lebanon and Palestine and Syria and Jordan and Iraq. I want to erase that and raise a nation that is capable of being sovereign, that has all the components of sovereignty, the resources, the population mass, the intelligence and military capabilities. Palestine by itself will still be a small player that could be manipulated by outsiders, and we'll be back to the same circle. No, I don't want a Bahrain. I don't want a fabricated state for the sake of a state. And for those colonists that are on our land, it's clear that they wouldn't accept to live in equality as for centuries Jewish, Christian, and Muslim and secular Palestinians in the region lived. They don't want equality. They believe that they are the chosen people. And this is why, in a situation of a one state, without us even attempting to expel them as a punishment for their crimes, they themselves will leave and go to live in Toronto or New York or London or Sydney, where they can maintain their Jewish supremacy, where the American, the Canadian, the Australian, and the British citizens are docile enough to accept that their own states give more rights to Jews than others in those countries.
So let's switch then. I'm glad I asked you that question, Laith. It's been a long time. I should have asked you that question long ago. It only occurred to me today to finally put it to you after seeing this latest outrage about the 19 settlement outposts. I'd like to switch now to the subject of Iran. And over the last few days, the Western and Israeli media have been crowing about a report in NBC which claims that Netanyahu, who apparently wants to have yet another meeting with his fellow war criminal Donald Trump, this time in Florida before the end of December, is going to be presenting to the Orange Monster a plan or possible plans for striking Iran again. This NBC report, which has been widely quoted in the Israeli and Western press, is based upon a U.S. official with direct knowledge of the plans and 4 former Israeli officials who have been briefed on the plans, none of whom is named. Okay, so that's the background. I have a few questions for you about this, but let me start first with this simple one. Do you think the Trump administration is crazy enough to go to war with Venezuela and Iran at the same time?
Well, they may have no choice but to, because clearly the minute the U.S. is engaged in Venezuela, things are going to go out of control in Western Asia, whether it's in the Syrian battlefield or the Iraqi battlefield or the borders here between Lebanon and Palestine, occupied Palestine. And clearly, once things are out of control, it's impossible to put back the genie in the bottle. So, even the axis of resistance itself must be preparing to take advantage of such a situation. If I was in charge of any military preparations, I would be taking advantage of the fact that for the first time since the end of the Vietnam War, that the American might is not concentrated in West Asia. So the United States have all its naval assets in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, and they will have a really hard time to provide any military aid to the Zionists if a battle ensues right here in West Asia at the same time. Even in terms of thinking about their air force, they will have to be engaged in Venezuela. They wouldn't have time to come and fly into Western Asia to defend the Zionist colony. So I think Netanyahu is worried about that. He may want them to trigger something before with Iran, so they don't get engaged in Venezuela, even though that the Zionists hate Venezuela and hate the Venezuelan leadership and hate the Venezuelan people, not only for their support of Palestine and Palestinian liberation, but because Venezuela provides an example for the peoples of the South in Africa, Latin America, and Asia of dignified sovereign rule and being able to stand in the face of the empire that the Zionists use as a club to bash on everybody that puts their head up. They're scared of uppity brown people anywhere. Any uppity brown man anywhere is a threat, because more brown people could become uppity because of that example, right? So it's pure racism beyond the fact that they are capitalists and want to steal everybody's resources and want to help the United States steal everybody's resources, not only because of the Venezuelan support to Palestine, but because of the dignified presence of leadership in Venezuela that represents the will and hopes of peoples in the South.
Yeah. I tried to download today. I just couldn't do it. There's a video that was published on the Resistance News Network, video of solidarity from the Palestinian resistance to the people of Venezuela, which I thought was quite instructive. Now, just returning to this piece in NBC News, I have an alternative hypothesis about what is going on here, which I'd like to share with you. And it relates to this character, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. 4 days ago, the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee published yet another photo of the former Israeli PM with the depraved pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. This undated photo, which is part of that batch of released photos. And by the way, the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have only released something like 1% or less of the 95,000 photos they recently received from the Epstein estate, and they're claiming that they're champions of transparency. Anyways, in this particular photo, what you see there is Barak seated next to Woody Allen on the right, and Epstein is standing there with his hands on their chairs. And next to Barak apparently is billionaire Thomas Pritzker, and the magician David Blaine is standing to the side. You can see somebody on the left there. Anyways, this is just one of numerous photos and a mountain of evidence showing that Ehud Barak and his closest advisor were very close to Epstein, met with him dozens of times. In fact, Barak's right-hand man spent apparently lengthy periods of time staying at Epstein's Manhattan mansion. And in addition to all this stink and stench involving Israel and Epstein, you have a growing level of suspicion, I would say, amongst people in the United States, and especially the MAGA movement, that Israel might have had a hand in the murder of Charlie Kirk. And whether or not that is true, I think we can safely say that Israel, with complete justification, is very concerned about this, because it's basically unleashed its most influential Zionist mouthpieces like Barry Weiss and Ben Shapiro to vilify Candace Owens, who has been the one who's probably done the most to raise serious questions about whether Israel had any involvement in the murder of Charlie Kirk. So returning then, Laith, to the NBC story. When I read that thing, I read it 3 times. It actually doesn't disclose anything useful or new. We all knew that Trump and Netanyahu are thinking seriously and talking about another attack on Iran. You don't have to rely upon some anonymous sources to come to that conclusion. The article doesn't say when the attack might occur. The article doesn't say what the attack might look like. It's basically just a repetition dressed up as some kind of bombshell story of stuff that we already knew. And so I think what might be going on here is that this is a cover story, that basically they have to come up with some explanation for why Netanyahu is flying to the United States again. And what they don't want us to think or suspect is that maybe the real subject of conversation is going to be Epstein, the Epstein files, which Trump has not released in violation of the law he signed into force last month, and this growing suspicion amongst MAGA, supporters that Israel might have had a hand in Charlie Kirk's murder. So I guess my question to you is, Laith, what do you make of my theory? In particular, do you think that Epstein and Charlie Kirk are likely to be on the agenda the next time these two war criminals meet?
Yeah, look, all of these things are definitely related. Another thing is, of course, that Trump is a senile, vegetable, and Netanyahu is really in control of anything and everything the United States does on the file of the Zionist colony. So him visiting the United States so often, almost on a quarterly basis right now, and speaking in front of the Parliament, Congress, now he's the leader of a country that spoke the most in front of the Congress, that had the highest number of visits, more than the Queen of England that lived for so long, So this shows you how integrated the two entities are and how much control Netanyahu and the leadership of the Zionist colony have on anything that has to do with their file and the files of Western Asia or other files. Now it seems like it's growing to control all of the foreign policy of the United States, because it doesn't make sense, or the buildup on Venezuela, if you don't put it in the context also of the Zionist colony trying to bash anyone that had stood with Palestine. So, and of course, we look at that 1% of files that were released. I mean, some of these things were really disturbing. Of course, everything that has to do with pedophilia is disturbing, but I think one of the most disturbing photos that I saw was that photo with Epstein topless, and you can see in the corner the legs of a child that's clearly under 8 years old. So the depravity and the pedophilia wasn't only towards teenagers. It seems like there was children, toddlers that are victims of this. And all these individuals that we see sitting in this photo here, we saw Woody Allen, but there was that other situation with Noam Chomsky and his multiple visits and his meetings with Woody Allen and Steve Bannon. So what does this tell me? Once I see Chomsky, Steve Bannon, Woody Allen, all in this circle of Epstein, I see controlled opposition, right? Remember, Woody Allen was part of this cinema that was touted in the United States as progressive in the 1970s, right? He was the edge of progressive, anti-authoritarian, blah, 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 as a representation to counter the communist fever that was spreading around Latin America and Europe, right? So he was the cultural counter to real communist revolutionaries. Is that so? Noam Chomsky seems to have been controlled opposition also, right? Steve Bannon is controlled opposition for the right. So Chomsky and Bannon, their job is to make sure that the beasts of wild, the animals in the animal farm don't stray too far. Okay, they keep bringing the sheep back into the fold, with Chomsky telling people to vote Democrat and what have you. And finally, the last thing I would say here, you mentioned, of course, their attempt to build up a case of war against Iran. Iran is getting ready for that. Iran knows that the Zionist colony is going to attack it at any moment. Today and yesterday, over the last 48 hours, there's been hundreds of missile tests conducted. There's videos everywhere that people can watch them. People are filming from the major cities of Iran as these missile tests are happening, of former missiles and new missiles that are coming into service. Iran is supposedly, according to Israeli media, is producing around 6,000 missiles a day. So, and will be able to sustain a long-term war, not only a 12-day war, that will destroy the Zionist colony if it is instigated. And so, yes, I think there's possibilities of us going to war because the Zionists don't like the attention of daddy in the White House being all put on Venezuela. They're scared to be left alone. They may trigger it before even the war in Venezuela.
Yeah, I tried to find it here while you were speaking, Laith, but apparently one of the photos they published just in the last few days was a photo of Chomsky with Ehud Barak. He was not only hanging out with Epstein and Steve Bannon, but even the war criminal Barak himself. And I was reminded yesterday that Chomsky, for largely inexplicable reasons, was quite critical of the BDS movement for many years. And one must ask, I've said nothing but good things about Noam Chomsky up until now, and talked many times about how manufacturing consent had a dramatic impact on my worldview. And to this very day, I feel indebted to Chomsky and Herman for enlightening me with that book. But I can't imagine what the man was thinking and how he could possibly justify having a relationship with the unrepentant war criminal, even if it was only a casual friendship, Ehud Barak. In any case, I'd like to turn now to Lebanon, Laith. And there's been some interesting developments on that front, I understand. Resistance media reported this morning that Israel violated the Lebanon ceasefire yet again. The reports are that its genocide forces killed 3 people in a drone strike targeting a car in the town of Quneitra, Saida district in southern Lebanon. Can you shed more light on what appears to have happened there, Laith? Like, for example, who are the victims? Why was this strike carried out?
There's never a reason for these strikes other than just pure bloodlust that the Zionists have. 3 civilians, actually, and one of them was a Lebanese military officer on off-duty, traveling in this car. So here's a Lebanese soldier now that is martyred today. And every day there's attacks like this. Yesterday there was an attack on a car and on a motorbike. Again, civilians. There's, Hezbollah is not shy. Whenever anyone is related to them that is martyred, they openly announce it. So the Zionists have run through their bank of targets that they had pre this war. And they're now just randomly attacking anybody they feel like, just to continue having daily terror in the lives of the Lebanese people in the south. This targeting also of civilian homes is also to deter people from rebuilding and going back to the south. It's just plain terror. But the civilians in the south of Lebanon right now, over the last few days and over the next few days, are purposefully conducting activities in these frontline villages during the Christmas and New Year time, public events that are inviting all of Lebanon to come to as a form of resilience and resistance. So, Khiam and is having events. We went to Khiam, where the prison right on the edge of the Hula Valley. What is it called? Multiple villages are doing lighting of Christmas trees, especially mixed Christian Shia villages right on the border. They put their Christmas trees and they invited the public. There is a few tours that are organized, people coming down from Beirut, shopping in the south purposefully for their Christmas shopping to help the local economy and families that are reopening their businesses. So, and of course we remember that the Zionists and the Americans gave a deadline to the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah completely by December 31st, which is less than 10 days away. And that didn't happen. So will the Zionists trigger a war in Lebanon? I doubt it. Not sure. They're crazy. They're lunatics. They're dragging the whole world to World War III. So nothing will be surprising if it happens. But at the moment, all we see is just terrorism actions by the Zionists to maintain the unnormalcy in the life of people in the South.
I'm glad you raised the subject of disarmament because there's been some interesting statements coming out of Lebanese political figures in that regard in the last couple of days. I'd like to begin with this statement from the Lebanese Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, who says that the Hezbollah disarmament south of the Litani River is to wrap up in days. And first, before I continue down this path, I just want to say, is that in your view an accurate depiction of what is going on, Laith?
I mean, Hezbollah itself said that it had withdrawn as required, and clearly there is, anything that the Israelis know about, they've told the Lebanese military and the UNIFIL, and the UNIFIL and the Lebanese military have been saying for months that they cannot find any weapons anywhere in the south of the Litani.
Okay, so a more controversial position is being expressed on this subject by another Lebanese political figure. Let me just pull that up here. This is a person by the name of Samir. I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Geagea.
Jaja. Jaja.
Jaja. Sounds like Joey Jaja from Godfather Part 3. So he's the leader of the Lebanese forces, and he says that the Hezbollah position is wrong, namely the position that disarmament only need occur south of the Litani River. And he says that under the ceasefire agreement and UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which was adopted by the Security Council in 2006, Hezbollah must disarm. All groups, all non-state actors must be disarmed across the entirety of Lebanon under the resolution. And I just want to, when I saw this report, I went back and looked again at 1701, and I've put up on the screen here the relevant provisions. Now, it does say in paragraph 3, the beginning, the language here at the very outset is important. It doesn't direct that anything be done. What it does, what the Security Council says in paragraph 3 is that it emphasizes the importance of the extension of the control of the government of Lebanon over all Lebanese territory in accordance with the provisions of Resolution 1559 and blah, 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 for it to exercise its full sovereignty so that there will be no weapons without the consent of the government of Lebanon and no authority other than that of the government of Lebanon. However, the resolution also states in paragraph 2 that Israel must withdraw all of its forces from southern Lebanon in parallel. And paragraph 5, it says that the Security Council reiterates a strong support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon within its internationally recognized borders. So paragraph 3 does appear to lend support to what Jaja is saying, but he seems to be ignoring some pretty other important parts of this resolution. How do you react to Jaja's argument that Hezbollah is obliged under 1701 to disarm across the entirety of Lebanon?
Clearly, even reading this, it says, without the consent of the government of Lebanon, silence is consent, as we know. The Lebanese army is not confronting Hezbollah. It knows that if Hezbollah is disarmed at this moment without building a strong Lebanese military to defend the country, the Lebanese military will be crushed by HTS and the Zionist colony and anyone and everyone that feels like being a vulture, right? So as long as the Lebanese military is not able to reach, extend its control over all the Lebanese territory, that includes areas that the Israelis are occupying, then why should we, emphasize, disarming Hezbollah? Jaja is responsible for war crimes during the quote-unquote civil war. He collaborated with the Israelis throughout the war. He's responsible for the Sabra and Shatila massacre, along with his Zionist masters. But he's also responsible for the killing of thousands of Lebanese Christians that fought against him and his fascist team. And it was part of the end of the civil war to, pardon him, although he spent time in jail. So this man, has not learned from his collaboration, and he still provides those services to the U.S. and the Zionists. And if I was a Lebanese, and I think most of Lebanese people are always still worried about when would he return to his criminal activities.
Okay. Lastly, Laith, I want to ask you about, we've not had an opportunity to discuss yet what happened at Bondi Beach in Australia when some 15 persons, I don't know that they were all Jewish, but they were certainly overwhelmingly Jewish, were murdered by a father and son who we are told have some connection to ISIS. And I haven't had an opportunity to really follow these reports closely, but I've seen some indication that, and this is, just in case Zionist trolls go crazy, I want to be very clear. I've condemned this as an atrocity, and I have no hesitation in condemning it as an atrocity. But there are some indication that some of these people who were on that beach that day were very unsavory in terms of their views towards Palestinians and the genocide being perpetrated against them by Israel. I'm just interested, Laith, in your overall reaction to what happened in Bondi Beach. I'm not don't want to put any limits on what aspect of it you want to comment on. What do you take away from all of this, if anything?
Well, look, I've been saying for a while right now that the normalization of genocide, the normalization of mass rape on television, and right now with this whole Epstein thing, the normalization of even pedophilia. Maybe next will be the normalization of cannibalism, okay? The normalization of mass arrest, detention, and beatings of even underage citizens in Germany and other places that we see on a daily basis. All of this normalization will lead to normalization of political violence against the Zionists anywhere on this world. It's not what I'm calling for. It's just the norm of how things will develop, right? The chickens will come home to roost. That's what I've always said in the last 2 years. This is going to happen. I think violence will reach the Zionist community wherever they are, not the Jewish community. Mark my words, the Zionist community, wherever they are on this planet, as they are continuing to conduct genocide against Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims in their homelands, and continue to ostracize, persecute Palestinians, Muslims, and Arabs in the diaspora also, then the battle will also, from the other side, will spill everywhere on this planet, because the Zionists have chosen to make the whole globe into their battlefield. Okay? Not my choice, their choice. That's number one. The other thing that I would say about specifically the attack on Bondi Beach in Sydney is that this was an event organized by the Chabad. The Chabad, whatever you want to pronounce it as, are the ultra-fascist Jewish supremacist Zionist movement. They are the ones that are we were just talking about those colonies in the West Bank. They're the ones that run those. They're the ones that are behind Smotrich and Ben Gvir, not even behind Netanyahu, right? And the rabbi of the Shabbat Australia, who was leading this event on the Bondi Beach, who was organizing this event, was responsible of taking hundreds of Australians to participate in the genocide in Gaza, and was filmed bringing those Australians to volunteer in the genocidal army, was filmed inside Gaza doing prayers for these genociders, and was gloating in his tweets, in his postings, as a rabbi, the head of Shabbat Australia, about calling the children of Gaza Amaleks, justifying the killing of Palestinian children, men and women with or without weapons, justifying the rape of Palestinian children, men and women. And he was the first target in the shooting in Bondi. He was the highest ranking person that died on that attack. And all of those who died on that attack, including the child that was there, were all members of the Chabad synagogue. Okay. So some people will want to outright condemn just out of positionality, as you did just now. But imagine there was a KKK Christmas party, led by, I don't know, David Duke, or somebody that was responsible for the lynchings that happened in the South. And Black resistance in the United States shot up that KKK Christmas party after the massacre in Alabama, what is it called, where they shot up the two churches and burnt the children in the churches in the 1960s during the fight for civil liberties. Would we be condemning it the way that people are lining up to condemn this attack on the Chabad event? I don't think so. I think most people, even that they are American, would be celebrating the death of David Duke, for instance, in a shooting on a Christmas event for KKK. Okay? So that's one thing. The other thing is that I don't know if this is a actual false flag. I don't know. Because clearly, for somebody to know that the head of Chabad Australia is going to be at that moment, in that place, at that beach, and to have snipers to take him out, this requires intelligence. This is not like a lone wolf, ISIS, out of control. Either really you want to convince me, and you, all of those who are saying that this is a false flag, they all have to convince me that somehow the Zionists decided to kill their most important asset in Australia. He's more important than AIPAC, like the AIPAC version of Australian AIPAC, because he has the hardcores that are going to carry arms, that are going to beat up Palestinians in the streets of Sydney when they go out demonstrating. This is who killed them. CIA, Mossad, ISIS, Australian intelligence decided to kill their most important asset in Australia on the Zionist wing just for what? For what? What are they achieving right now? To ban the word globalize the Intifada? That doesn't make sense to me, right? Yes, we know Hannibal Directive and Israeli Zionists kill their own. We know that. But none of those that were killed in the Hannibal Directive were generals. This guy is a general in the religious military. The church hierarchy of the Zionist, he wasn't killed by a false flag, in my opinion.
So I'm glad you talked about positionality. I want to be clear what my position is on this, because it's not as simple. I condemn it, and that's the end of the matter. There's more to the story than that. First of all, I didn't know. I kind of had some vague idea about who this character was, this rabbi, but I didn't know all of that detail that you just recounted. And I'm in no position to confirm or deny it. I trust you, Laith. I have you on my program because you do outstanding journalism. So I'm just going to assume that everything you've recounted about him is accurate, and that there are no countervailing considerations, and that's fine. I'm perfectly prepared for purposes of our discussion to assume that. My position is this: that person that you've described, that rabbi, the way to deal with that person is to prosecute him for complicity in a genocide and send him away to jail for a very long time. My view is that you do not, you do not seek justice by means of, extrajudicial assassination. I oppose that in all circumstances. Now, you could say, and I suspect you would say, but the fact of the matter is that the Australian justice system is never going to hold this man accountable. That's true. That's fair. But I would then say to you that the way to deal with that is for us to overthrow our government and to replace it with people who are actually going to enforce the law against these characters. I still would come to the same conclusion that if we allow that to be the means by which we deal with people who engage in this sort of depravity, we're going to descend into civil war. And it'll be a horrible situation for everybody. So I prefer to do this by changing the government. And that admittedly is going to require a lot of sacrifice and hard work. And a lot of us are going to get beaten up and thrown in jail, but that's the price we pay for democracy. That's my position. So, and by the way, but one last thing. Again, on the assumption that this person has done all of those things, I have no reason to doubt what you're saying. I would categorically reject the idea that he's innocent. Okay. He doesn't have to be innocent for you to say killing him is not the way to go. The way to go is prosecution. I certainly don't agree that he was innocent. And I have a strong objection to any such characterization of people who behave in that manner. So I'll leave the last word to you.
Yes. Look, it will be ideal, given that there is no such thing as a justice system in the West that will provide actual justice to the Palestinians, right? And in fact, most probably provide any justice to any citizen of those countries, not only on the file of Palestine. Look at we're just talking about the Epstein files. Do you think those victims of this pedophilia will ever see justice provided to them? Will the indigenous peoples of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United States ever receive justice? Will the Black, diaspora in the Americas ever receive justice? Where the working class will? I don't think so. So this requires revolution in the West. And that is something that I would love to see. I would love to see our brothers and sisters in the West countries that are oppressed by their own states rise up and globalize the intifada. But in the meanwhile, for Palestinians, for Arabs and Muslims and Africans and Latin Americans and Asians that are questing liberation from colonialism and imperialism and Zionism, can we afford waiting for the peoples of Australia or Canada to get their shit together, excuse my language, and rise up for a revolution? I don't think I can afford. Look at the indigenous people in Canada. They're still waiting for some revolutionary movement in Canada to help them. It will not come. So peoples that are colonized their priority is their own liberation. And thus, let me tell you, I think it would be a great thing to see a civil war in the United States. We started talking about, the Israelis being scared that there's a war within the Republicans. Well, there is a war inside the Republican Party between the Israel First and the America First. There is a civil war inside the Democratic Party between the Israel First and the America First also. In both parties right now, there's a rebellions. That rebellion inside the whole United States has pushed the government to bring down basically the army on the streets under the fatigue of ICE, and is targeting every brown person that they can catch. Not only Latin Americans or illegal immigrants or what have you. These are all indications of a real civil war active in other ways than what we are accustomed to in the 1800s, or civil wars in Africa or Latin America or Asia. This is civil war inside the belly of the empire. It's going to take a different shapes than we are used to, but it's already active. And as the fascists are armed to the teeth and are kidnapping people in unlicensed vans, wearing baklavas in their heads, what the hell can be more than that to know that you are in a civil war? It is actually pertinent upon the American peoples, citizens of the United States, who have under the Constitution of the United States the right to carry arms and form a militia. I'm not calling on Canadians because it's not legal there, but Americans, it's legal for them. Americans should form militias in their cities. Palestinian Americans, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, Latin Americans, all should form militias and register them and march in their neighborhoods and create defense units in their neighborhoods. Like what we are just seeing right now, the Australian government and the British government and maybe the Canadian government is going to legalize Jewish militias. Did you hear about this, Dimitri?
No.
They're going to legalize Jewish militias in Canada, the US, Australia, and the UK. Why do they get that right and we cannot protect ourselves? I think this is where it's going. And as a Palestinian, I am for all civil wars in the West. Let it all burn, like my capitals. For 3 decades now, we're watching the capitals of the Arabic people burn to the ground. I want the West to be busy fighting itself. And if there's any justice that movements in the West can do to us after 100 years of being under their boot, is to make their own states and military busy with them, so we can be easier to liberate ourselves.
I said I was going to let you have the last word, but I do just want to clarify one thing.
I thought this was going to be an anomaly if you let me have the last word.
No, I'm not going to say anything to contradict. I just want to clarify my own position because, again, you know how many people of bad faith are out there who try to twist our words and everything. When I said overthrow the government, I do believe that if you have sufficient numbers, you can do that nonviolently. You can do it, but you're going to take some casualties. Let's be very clear about that, especially with the lunatics, the depraved psychopaths we have in power in the West. And I personally would be willing to take some casualties, including laying my own body on the line, to bring down the government without resorting to violence myself. But for that to happen, the numbers have to be huge. There have to be a lot of people who are engaging in nonviolent resistance in order for that to happen. So unfortunately, we're not there yet in the West. And I hope that in my lifetime, I live to see the day when we are, that we can bring down our depraved governments without resorting to violence. In any case, I just wanted to clarify that. But I really thank you again, Brother Laith, for your passion and your candor, and look forward to our next discussion.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. Merry Christmas to all those who are watching, our viewers around the world. Jesus of Palestine, preaches love to our neighbors, and we want to have a neighborly life of love with all our human family. By the way, Free Palestine TV is releasing on Christmas Eve a report from the only Christian Palestinian refugee camp in the world. It's just north of Beirut. We went there and visited. We spoke to the locals, and we spoke to the priest and the parishioners in the church. You can take a look and see the realities of Palestinian Christians here in the refugee camps, how they are living 78 years after expulsion from their homeland. Merry Christmas to everybody. Please also donate if you can. It's Christmas generosity season.
You're here. And we're signing off today from Beirut and Montreal for Reason to Resist.